Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So, Matt Walsh, he's been going on a trajectory of really strange nativism and white supremacy. And he's juggling between two identities of being a Zio shill, but then trying to say he's an isolationist, Magatardian, okay? And his boss is Ben Shapiro. But then he's trying to almost get a little near to the Groypers. So I see this pattern developing in him, which happened in Eliza Schaefer, which there's Tim Pool or Stykes Exenhammer. They start to dance the lines, they are like these grifters who, they lick their finger and see which way the wind's blowing, and they go that way because they got to keep the gravy train flowing, okay? Now, due to that, I'm paying more attention to what Matt Walsh is saying, because before he kind of just had the, what is a woman? Oh, look, there's a blue-haired lady saying something ridiculous on TikTok. And he was very mellow. He used to make videos in his car. It wasn't really someone to pay attention to. But since he's really going after illegals, and it started to really slander Muslims, now it's like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to you because I think that you're going into some bad territory. So, in a couple of the tweets that I'll include, you can see that people think he's dog whistling to white supremacy, and that he is also promoting the deportation of people who are not born in America, even if they be legal. Remember, he did say America should stop accepting third worlders and that we can't be the nation's soup kitchen. So, it's not just about being legal or illegal. Okay? So, this whole episode of the recent guy, Zohran, I think how you pronounce his name. He's a male feminist socialist who dabbles in Islam, supposedly. And one minute people are calling him a communist, the next they're calling him a socialist, the next they're saying he's bringing Sharia law. All three of those ideologies are not synonyms, and communism is different than socialism. And when I read the book, the fatwas of Imam al-Albani, it was quite clear that communism is not compatible with Islamic law, Islamic values. And historically, the communists were not too friendly to, Muslims, devout Muslims, okay? And China has communism, and as Marx said, religion is the opiate of the masses, and China has Uyghur Muslims being severely regulated, okay? Communists are not that friendly towards the devoutly religious, whether it be Catholic priests, or the Pope, or Islam and a caliphate, okay? So it's important to see how stupid a lot of the Magatardians are, because they're trying to conflate terms that are contradictory, and this is absurd. So, in one of the posts, Matt Walsh says how he can make they, or him, can make New York City better. And he mentions deporting all illegals. Now, there is a problem in New York where illegals are put into a limbo. It's a sanctuary state. It was made a sanctuary state by Andrew Cuomo in 2017, which is pretty funny because these people are saying because Andrew Cuomo lost, NYC is doomed. But I don't even think they realize Andrew Cuomo is the one who made New York a sanctuary state by executive order. So, they're making it sound like Andrew Cuomo should have won and then that New York would do better. But Andrew Cuomo did lockdowns, which decimated the economy. The subway was still dangerous. They still had a rat problem. And pollution is moderate, but it's not the best. And he made them a sanctuary state. So you can see how the Magatardians, it's not about policy necessarily all the time, but about race. Andrew Cuomo is Italian, so he's pale. The other guy is brown. Andrew Cuomo was a bit of a sleazeball and got in trouble for like touching one of his staffers inappropriately, whether that be true or not. He still got in trouble for it. And his brother Chris Cuomo was fired from CNN for defending his brother. So there's a whole thing with that weird family. Okay, so illegals are put into a limbo of they need to get papers to work. Now, if these people come, all right, you want to do Uber, you want to do taxi, help set them up. I'm thinking of the scene in Gangs of New York where the politician, he's like handing out, flyers to join the military and soup and whatever, and how when you have fresh migrants off the boat, you need to sort of help them out. Now, I've mentioned in the past that the Republicans, they don't go to these immigrants and say, hey, here's what we like about America, this is how we do things here. They're not really invested in that. They kind of just expect as soon as you step on the American soil, you become a bald eagle spirit and you paint yourself red, white, and blue, and you start eating corn dogs and shopping at Walmart, and all of a sudden you're Americana. It's not how it works. And the necessity of helping people to get situated creates stability. But remember, Republicans want to cut healthcare and food programs for illegals. So this doesn't help illegals get on their feet. This sets them back. And you can see there isn't any sort of charity or helping hand energy with the conservative Christians. They see the poor and the needy, or the people who they just need a little leg up and they'll be fine. They don't want to offer help. They just kind of want everyone to come established. So there's more of a classicist angle towards this whole conversation that isn't really being addressed. Trump's gold card just allows people, you got money, come on in. So Trump and MAGA equate money with morals. Okay? And illegals, because some of them come from rougher conditions, they're less entitled. Americans are more obese, more gluttonous, more entitled, want smoke breaks, call in sick for any reason. They don't have the Chinese work ethic, the Latino work ethic. They just don't have it, okay? And Americans feel they're owed a golden spoon. They feel like they don't have to work as hard. Now, heck, I don't want to work for pennies on the dollar, but having some income is better than no income, right? Better to have poverty wages and have an honest day's work than to have haram wages and be making mad money. And so, you're not above a certain wage. If you recall, there's a hadith that talks about, instead of begging, you can sell firewood. The hand that is above, that gives, is better than the hand that takes and receives. There's hadiths about that, and I've shared them before. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, died with having very little. And when you think about how many of the companions died with having very little, they didn't just have hordes of wealth piled up. They were not misers. They were not overly spendthrifts. And they managed money very well. And Uthman ibn Affan used his wealth to help Islam spread by arming people with weapons and buying horses and camels for jihad. And so you can use your money wisely to get sadaqah jariyah and whatnot. So Islam isn't against wealth, but it's just how you use it, because you'll be held accountable for how you earned it and how you used it. And so these illegals, you can think about if you made it easier for people to get their food handler's permit, learn English. At community colleges, there's ESL. Some of them are taxpayer funded, so they're free, because very few people can afford higher education. Community colleges are great for people who are on a budget. And learning English from your phone and other stuff like that, it's not as easy, Although learning Spanish and English, they're like best buddies. It's like a great combo. And the good thing about California is so many people speak Spanish who are bilingual, trilingual. You can learn by working in certain places and living in certain communities. So there's a lot of help. It's a lot harder for Vietnamese and Chinese and other languages, like other people. Like if you're from India and you speak whatever language is over there, that's going to be a lot harder for you because you don't have the plethora of people to practice with. Okay? So deporting all the illegals is not going to just automatically make New York City better. You need to give them some opportunities. You need to help them get on their feet, get situated. You need to have programs, tell them where to enroll, how to do stuff. It's like when you go in certain tourist spots, there's like a brochure. Here's what you can do in our town. Have little things like that. Those are more viable solutions that are more humane and practical. But Matt Walsh isn't really interested in that. And so he scapegoats illegal immigrants. And whether you're legal or illegal, you're going to need some help. And there's citizens who also fall underneath because no one cares about them and no one has their back. And this is a problem. So if you grant people work permits to work and you explain to them they don't have to live in the city, they can venture out into the suburbs or start a business or do something, have a food stand. This will help a lot of people. Introduce them to like a night class that teaches them how to use social media to start a business, like help people. You know, there's a lot of ways you can encourage illegals to be entrepreneurs and get themselves set up so they don't form mini communities. Because people complain about integration. Oh, they're not integrating, they're staying within their own communities. But then at the same time, the MAGA-tardian, white supremacist Republicans and all those on the right, they're not very welcoming and active on convincing people of their ideas and helping them get a leg up. There's a lot of stigma there. And so you can't be mad at people who stay within their own bubbles, because if they stay in their own bubble, they have support. You know, they don't have the in-group preference going on as vehemently when they get some opportunity to get some help from a different community. But Republicans don't want to offer that. Whereas liberals are kind of more about inclusivity. And so that's why some of them tend to go to the left, because the left says, hey, you know, we want to give food bank programs. We want this, we want that. And Republicans are more like, you know, do it yourself, but then they don't tell you how to do it yourself. They kind of just throw you to the wolves. Now, he mentions arrest all violent criminals and put them in jail. Now, that will, by deporting all the illegals and getting rid of all the violent criminals, that will make New York City more livable. And then someone says get rid of Islamicists, so Muslims, and get rid of all the non-whites. So you can see the anti-Muslim, anti-brown, black, Asian, you name it, audience that he's solely building. Or he's trying to cater to, rather. Where he's dipping his toes in. And this isn't as easy as he makes it sound. And so, later on in the video, I'm going to show you some interesting facts about the jails and whatnot. So stay tuned for that. And obviously people want the violent criminals locked up. We also have to remember, though, that those criminals are not productive. They sit in their cells and produce nothing while absorbing tax money. And it's better for them to be in sort of a labor camp. I've really argued for labor camps where the inmates are forced to work, to grow their own food, make the prisons have some sort of garden program, something where they have to make things for the prison to save taxpayers money, instead of sitting around, jacking off, drinking Pruno, you know, the homemade wine they make there, and stuffing their faces with chips, and having sodomy sessions with each other. That's pretty much what the inmates do all day, every day. And how is that fair that they get to lounge about and literally leech off the system because they don't want to be noble citizens? But noble citizens and good-hearted illegals, they have to earn their daily bread, but an inmate doesn't. And budget cuts happen because there ain't enough tax money. Yet, we could make the prisons, a place of punishment, but also of utility. So, I've talked about that, so check out some of those live streams as well. In another post, he talks about 40% of people in New York City are foreign born, and that this is a tragedy and a disgrace, and it's not an American city anymore by definition. And I looked up, the range can be from 36% to 40%. So we'll give the principle of charity, but it's still going to be an American city, regardless of a migration influx. It's still part of American territory. It hasn't been annexed. It's American. So, let's say a tourist hub. There's lots of tourist spots across America. So if there's a bunch of tourists in a certain area, does that suddenly make the area no longer American? If a city has, for 10 years there's an influx of migrants, and then those migrants move to another area, did that city suddenly lose its American tax identification for those 10 years simply because there was a little influx of immigrants? No. That's not how it works. But what does he mean by foreign born? And it's a disgrace. That does hint at a racial thing. Now, I don't know who would want to live in the hellhole of New York City. I've been there, saw the Statue of Liberty. My dad took me there with one of my ex-stepmoms. Well, I'd have to blur out my face, so it wouldn't really be good to share those pictures, but I was not impressed. I went on saw the Milahan, Beauty and the Beast, those plays. There was Phantom of the Opera. I was not impressed with New York City at all. Tall ass buildings, crammed in, no trees, just absolutely ugly to me. I don't like cityscapes. I like landscapes, forestscapes. I like the ocean. I like nature. And I'm sure many of you are aware of that. I don't want to live in a concrete jungle. And the smell of just cars, the noise, the ambulances, people hustling you, trying to sell you stuff, the screens in Times Square. Oh, it's like living inside a television. It's just a nightmare. So, I don't know why people want to live there, but some people feel like they're going to be a star because they go there. And it's like Hollywood used to be a place for actors to go. San Francisco was a place where you could go to be a great writer. New York City was, or Las Vegas was a place if you wanted to go to be a porn star, or a stripper, or a showgirl, or a go-go dancer, like something like that, something degenerate. And then New York was like business, or some type of law degree, stuff like that, or finance. There's hubs that change for depending on where you want to go. Like Los Angeles is also, now it's for like OnlyFans girls, wannabe comedians, stuff like that. Every town has a hub. Every state has something that it's used for, okay? So when he says New York City is now a disgraced, tragic area because it has too many non-whites, I don't think he really realizes what he's talking about, okay? Because it's still the same shithole that it's always been, in my opinion. It's just, he's mad that it doesn't look as white. Now, some of you may not know that the NYC Indians, the Hackensack Indians, and the Rockaway Indians were part of the New York Territory back in the 16th century, right? So they had it there for a long. They were there for a long time, right? Then immigrants start showing up in the 16th, 17th centuries, and then they start, buying land and conquering land, all that jazz. So already off the bat, the red man had that territory for a while. And America isn't just, you can't say America became America in 1492 when Columbus sailed the ocean blue. No. 1776. When you got the paperwork done, that's when what's up. And America ain't that old. You look at Iran, the territory of Iran, Persia is far older. Syria, far older. Iraq, far older. Okay? England is literally older than America. So, Matt Walsh already is ignoring how land changes hands. Okay, it was the red man's, and then it became into the Dutch people's. And fun fact, Peter Minuit in 1625 called that area New Amsterdam. And it wasn't called New York, it was called New Amsterdam. And, naming a city after Amsterdam, it's like pretty funny. And he was the first director general by the Dutch West India Company. So, you got the red man being there first, and then you got Peter coming up and being like, this is called New Amsterdam. So already the city was named after someone else. And then Peter Minuit in 1626 purchased the Manhattan Island from the Indians. So the Manhattan Island, it was Indian territory. And with that Indian territory, there's going to be some Indians who stay there, but they sold it. They did the paperwork. But they already started the movement of changing owners. And so, what is there to really worry about when you think about change? Things are going to go the way they're going to go. From the 16th to the 20th century today, look how much New York has changed. The state and the New York City. And in the future, it's going to change again. Now, in 1635, the Dutch, they built Fort Amsterdam. And then in 1639, colonists started arriving from Holland. Not from Ireland or Scotland, but from Holland. So, New York City area, had the red man. And then it was colonized by people from Holland. And it was named the first fort after Amsterdam. Come on, Matt, Oh, but they're white, so it was okay. You can just see he's not a very serious person. Now, in 1664, Peter Stuyvesant, I can't pronounce his last name, he turns the fort over to the British, and the British rename it New York. So isn't that kind of funny? Matt Walsh is like, New York's no longer an American city because it's got less white people. And you're like, okay. The red man had it, then the colonists of Holland had it, and then the British took it and renamed it. So it was New Amsterdam, and then it was renamed New York. And you just see already in that small time period, you have different owners, different occupiers of the land. Okay? And today, you go to New York, you're seeing everyone from everywhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. And so, keep that in mind when someone's acting like the sky is falling because change occurs. Now, if you went to New York City and say, like, how many red men are there? How many people from Holland are there? How many British are there? Probably very little. It's mostly black, Jewish, probably some Irish still hanging around there, and some Italians were there. And if you just look at the history of the Italian mob, the Irish, the Jewish, and the Italian mob in New York, well, that was a time period as well. So, New York City and New York in general just has such a wild history. But it wasn't founded by, a cowboy. It wasn't a Christian cowboy on the back of a Mustang drinking whiskey and smoking cigars with a blonde-haired, blue-eyed bimbo in the back. No. It was a red man, and then it slowly changed. And land does that. From the 16th to the 20th century, how much has New York shifted in demographics, architecture, values, dialect, the accent of New York? Think about that. Something to think about. Now, New York, because remember, Matt is scapegoating illegals for all the problems in the world. Brown people, all the problems in the world. Okay? And rat problems are a huge issue in New York City. Because, they got no predators. They got no owls, no hawks, no kestrels, no eagles, no cats, no coyotes, no snakes. There's no natural predators to eat those rats. And there's a documentary, I think it's just called Rats, but it showed how rats got this big parasite problem. They're a very pernicious creature, vermin that carry a lot of diseases. And if you look at the Black Death, the bubonic plague, I believe it was, they say that was a lot to do with rats being on ships and bringing over fleas and whatnot. So rats are pretty disgusting. I own 2 rats. They're very smart, but there's a reason why in history they're so hated. And because New York City has no natural habitats for wildlife and doesn't do proper sanitation, you can see that that's actually a bigger problem than illegal migrants, because rats spread diseases. Okay? Now, on August 2023, they had the Anti-Rat Day of Action. The rat problem is so bad in New York, they had to create a day. Okay? And they have a rat czar named Kathleen Karate. So, imagine living in a place where there's piles of garbage in black bags, and then as you walk, you see, a rat going here, a rat going there. And rats chew on things like contaminated food. Their urine is really strong. Rats are very intelligent. It's a disaster. And they've even thought about putting rats on birth control. So it's like, what the hell? It's intense, because you don't want to have too much poison being used on rats, because when a stray cat eats them, they get poisoned as well. And then that poisoned animal's carcass pollutes the water, the soil. It's not good. But the point I'm trying to make here is that rats make life more unlivable and unsanitary than illegal immigrants. Matt didn't mention that. And there's a viral clip where a rat has a piece of pizza and it's going down the stairs of the subway. It was a very funny clip. It was like classic New York City. but the rats are pretty big and fat and smarter. And so you think about how a New York City rat is almost like a second icon. The whole history of rats in New York City is pretty funny. And, I mean, if you have a woodland area, you have natural wild rats, but they feed the predator birds. So you're not too worried about it. In safe communities, you have house cats that are allowed to go outside. They go have some fun and, hunt some rats. So it's naturally maintained. And when there's space for snakes to live, non-venomous snakes, they love to eat some rats. So having natural habitats, not just tall, ugly skyscrapers, this could help. Now, New York could make some living walls, as they call it. I've even thought about them having trees made of marble or some type of concrete, like a sculpted tree, since they don't want to water the trees. And, it'll look beautiful, but having a stone tree where it's finely carved that, wildlife could live in. And you don't have to worry about watering the tree because it's made of stone, but it's particularly carved from a nice block of marble or granite or whatever you want to make out of it. But it would be smart to build some ways for the animals to live. Pigeons, they're pooping on everything. They're not hunting birds. But if you want rats to be solved, you got to have a population that respects wildlife, respects the nesting practices, and doesn't just kill and harm every wild animal they see. It's really important to be able to foster wildlife that helps out humanity by killing rats. Okay. Now, did Matt mention anything about rats? Disease vectors? The problems that businesses have? Did he ask for politicians to be held accountable for the garbage? No, just blame foreigners. Now, subway crime. Did Matt mention subway crime? No, I shared many times different events where people were pushed. And if you recall, YouTube put an age restriction on the video I did on the fire on the subway where somebody lit a woman on fire. No one's really stopped to help. People are very jaded in New York, very individualistic, because you're just surrounded by so many people, you can't care about everyone. But a woman was lit on fire, and lots of people have been pushed onto the tracks. And remember when the National Guard had to be sent to the subway. So already you can see that people don't want to use public transportation because if they can afford not to, it's just too violent. They got a bunch of druggies and they got a bunch of mentally ill people roaming about. And when it comes to mental illness, broken homes, okay, people not knowing how to cope, and drug culture, Americans gobble up drugs. And so when you have a culture of people who love drugs, promote drugs, need drugs, depend on drugs, and make fast, easy money from selling drugs, you're going to have a lot of users and consumers, and the more you use drugs, the more mentally ill you become. And that isn't discussed enough, and there's not enough programs in the school. But people just blame Latinos and Mexico and China and say, well, they're shipping in the fentanyl from China and then it's being manufactured in Mexico and brought here by the cartels. And there isn't an addressment of American rap music, hip-hop music, rock and roll, country music. They all promote intoxicant use. Is that regulated? Oh, freedom of speech, freedom of expression. Okay, you want to promote drugs and movies and music. Don't complain when your youths are depressed and they've been programmed to seek aid from intoxicants, and then they become crazy, and then because they have prolonged usage of these substances that they become mentally ill. So, did Matt mention hey, let's make New York City better by having more of a focus in the schools around the dangers of intoxicants. No, just blame the illegals and foreigners. Having foreigners is a disgrace for Matt, but not having enough programs in schools to persuade the youth to stop gobbling up drugs, well, oh no, we can't do that now, can we? Now, Matt claims to be Christian. You would think that he would want it to be where people are reminded not to use intoxicants, but New York City has a drinking culture, and I don't care how many Christians say Jesus drank wine, alcohol slides you get a buzz, you slide into cocaine, some weed, then some Adderall, and you just are skating into different substances. Then before you know it, you're like Elon Musk on a bunch of different uppers and downers, going on a whirlwind of a carousel of coma freakouts. Where you're like, So, the mentally ill are often that way because of childhood trauma and drug addiction. So fix childhood trauma, get a control on drug consumption, and maybe then you'll have less roaming weirdos doing things on the subway. But will he mention that? I don't think so. If you're on drugs and you're living in a rat-infested area, that's pretty dystopian. So New York City has a problem with rats and deranged homeless people and crime. Matt didn't mention that. Blame the brown guy who isn't given a work permit. Blame him. That's his fault. It's incredibly lazy. Now, in 2017, Andrew Cuomo, by executive order, made New York a sanctuary state. And California is a sanctuary state, and so is Colorado, from my understanding. And some of the white nationalist Christians of the Magatarian movement, they don't like this. And when we see how ICE is behaving inhumanely and targeting work sites and taking people in who have no criminal record, we can see that Trump's Gestapo is not as proficient and humane, and that they're just filling up quotas, and they're just really targeting people to target them, and they need to have reforms. We definitely want criminals punished, but just being illegal, and like you came here illegally, but you're doing good, making money, you are a good asset to your community, you're loved by your peers, you shouldn't be treated the same as, some gangbanger or drug dealer or prostitute. I don't really think that's ethical. And so it's just important to point out that Andrew Cuomo in 2017 led that. So with this recent election, they're freaking out like, Cuomo would have been the better choice, but then these people are complaining about the sanctuary status. It's just hilarious. So both the candidates are friendly towards immigrants. And New York should stay that way because it is a city where a lot of immigrants come to live. Ellis Island, you got Staten Island, you got people coming in on the boats. Remember that classic scene in Titanic, I come to America, where that guy, I think he's Italian, and he's waving and they see the Statue of Liberty or whatever, whatever. You get what I'm saying. Like, there was always that scene, or what is it, in The Godfather 1 or 2, Vito Corleone, he comes to New York, right, gets set up. It's just the way it goes. It's just an immigrant hub. Now, Texas and California are border states with Mexico, and that's where the immigration's coming from. It's no longer coming from ships on the East Coast. Now it's on the land. So, it's just another immigrant zone that shifted. Not really that big of a deal. process people, let it all play out, and stop being so nihilistic and give people resources. The Irish and Italians came, people just started showing up. Colonists, as we learned in the 16th century, started coming over from Holland. They didn't have a green card, they just showed up. Okay? Oh, they must have been good because they're white. No, I don't want to hear that. Come on now. The point is that we can't just be inhumane to people and treat them like a disease because they lack a piece of paper. That's just not ethical. Now, Matt Walsh, if you recall, he said to lock people up. Now, we want criminals put away. But MAGA has also called for people who hire illegals to be put in jail. And if you recall, I'll try to link to it later in the comment section or in the description box. The book I read about Rikers Prison and the bad conditions of that prison. And Rikers Prison is a New York prison. And there's been a lot of overcrowding going on in New York prisons. Okay? And there was a recent protest where the prison guards were like, these are terrible working conditions. We are not going to work like this. And over 2,000 guards were fired. This led to the state releasing non-violent criminals a little bit early because they didn't have enough guards for the inmates. And there was a law passed that if someone was fired, you couldn't rehire that person. There was some law. I'm trying to word it right, but they couldn't hire those people back because they were fired for protesting. Very strange. So, Matt Walsh is arguing for more people to be put in prison while not addressing the overcrowded nature already and the poor conditions and infrastructure of those prisons, right? And I don't think prisons should be Disneyland, but there are more efficient ways we can improve prisons, okay? So the fact that 2,000 guards protested says a lot, and when you look up the history of prisons and the problems in New York, you begin to see a totally different picture, okay? And you can't call for people to be put in prisons in mass even more while the system is really failing over there. And so maybe Matt should address those factors before calling for the problem to be exacerbated. Now, more than 25% of these playgrounds that they did a survey on, and one of them was, I think, the Bronx and areas in Harlem, they found it to be just really unsafe. Like, the playgrounds are choppy, there's needles, there's vagabonds, sketchy dudes hanging out there all day, and the playgrounds aren't safe, and they need to have more outdoor spaces for kids. And when you look at the price of rent for these tiny beehive apartments, it's over $2,000, okay? You got no patio, you got no nature, you're literally in a coffin box, paying more than 30% of your income towards rent. Look it up. A lot of New Yorkers, there's a housing crisis, so a lot of their income goes towards just having a roof over their heads, okay? Which has exacerbated the homeless problem, and then the homeless people are living in the subways. And they're living in some really shoddy conditions. And so kids, they don't really have space. They're in their apartments all day, getting unhealthy, getting fat, sitting down, watching Netflix, playing video games, not socializing, not breathing fresh air. It's not very safe for them to always walk alone, okay? And so that is a bigger problem. So moms are gonna go crazy sitting in the house all day, apartment all day, and they have to worry and watch their back for a homeless person, a criminal, and for safety measures to be perfected. They're on their guard essentially. And so, did Matt Walsh call to fix outdoor spaces for children so that moms can have a healthy way of getting their kid exercised and socializing. Nope, just absorb your kid into the digital world. Very sad. I've made posts on my blog before about what of a it's a serious blessing for a mom to be pregnant and push her stroller safely around a community. In Los Angeles, I shared a news story a while ago where a mother was pushing her baby stroller and a homeless person came up behind her and hit her in the head with a pipe. And she was screaming, pushing her stroller, no one came to help her. Alright? So, we must remember, moms need to have safe places for their children. And if you recall, there's a hadith that talk about the Prophet, peace be upon him, saying that living in a spacious area is good. So, living in a home with space. This is really important. But New York is not really designed like that. You're compressed. Like a sardine. So, high rent, no nature, rats everywhere, drug addicts, crime, lack of safe playgrounds. This is an issue. Scapegoating immigrants for the failures of the politicians isn't going to help. Playground deserts is another term for what I'm talking about. So, think about all of those issues. The public transportation isn't safe. People are gobbling up drugs, becoming deranged zombies. Children are seeing massive amounts of drug addicts everywhere because Americans love promoting drugs in music and in movies and celebrities as well. And they want to create safe injection sites so people can use more drugs. This isn't sustainable, okay? You have to do better. We all should do better. But Matt Walsh didn't mention any of those issues. And so, to reiterate, Matt Walsh says, people being foreign born is a tragedy. Well, if you look at the whole history of New York from the 16th century to the 20th century, it changes in demographics, being from the red man to people from Holland, then to the British, then the Irish, and then the Italians. You had some Jews, then you have blacks, and you have Asians, and now you have people from the Middle East. It's going to keep changing. That's just how that area is. And if you have time, just go through and examine how the demographics and values and culture, dress codes, cuisine have changed in New York City. And why do people like Matt Walsh really think that someone lacking a green card is what's making life worse? Offer them resources, help them, they'll get their leg up. In the Bible, I shared that there was these verses that talk about the duty to help the needy. In Islam, we are also encouraged through hadiths and whatnot, and in the Quran, to help the needy, the orphan, the widow. Every good deed you do, you're going to get rewarded for it. And if you do recall, I mentioned how when I moved to California, it was the illegals who helped me out a lot more than my own family. And when I cut ties with my step-grandpa over Palestine, I did make a point to remind my grandpa of that, my step-grandpa, that when I left home at 17, I never asked him for a penny. I'm in my 30s. He's never once asked me, do you need help with the electricity bill? Do you need food? If you were to face homelessness, you could come live with us. No. Nuh-uh. That's not... No. But my sister, she gets a lot of help from them. My mom, always asking them for money. Okay? Me, did all my damn self. And I never asked them for a penny. Nor did they ever offer. Alright? But it's important for people to recognize that if you help others, you're going to be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it was illegals who taught me even more work ethic. I always had a job. I had a paper out when I was 12. I worked all through high school, multiple jobs, and I dropped out of high school to work because I was 17. You know, I wasn't able to keep up my grades, and I was going to an alternative school because I got expelled for fighting, and they just had us sitting and doing packets all day. It was incredibly boring, and I just rather worked, and I didn't care about high school anymore. And my grandpa told me I had to leave, and he gave me at the end of the week. So I think he told me like on a Monday, I had to be out by Friday. And then I rented my friend's basement. And then from there, I moved to California. Okay, left. I had some clothes and some garbage bags. Didn't even have suitcases. Had a duffel bag for some important birth certificate, all that stuff, and my backpack. And I left. And my job, when I left Utah to go to California, I was working at a Chinese, it's like a Panda Express knockoff in a mall. It was like China Express or Chinese Express, something like that. You know how there's like alternatives to Panda Express in a food court? I was working a job like that. Handed in my uniform, got my final paycheck, ventured out to California on my own. I didn't tell my grandparents. I hugged my brother and sister goodbye and I left. Arrived in California, moved into Richmond, which is a very violent hood. And then from Richmond, I worked hard and I made it across the bridge into a different county, into the immigrant zones. I'm not going to name them because I don't want ICE to go raid those zones. And I rented a room and built myself up, you know, and that's the long and short of it. But it was Latinos who had the option of renting rooms. It was the Latinos who said, hey, you know, come to the carniceria, the panaderia. They had their markets and I was able to afford the food there. And they gave me a chance. I had a pit bull puppy and I rented a room from a half Mexican, half white fat lady and her Peruvian husband and father-in-law. And they let me have my pit bull puppy. I didn't even have a bed. They gave me a freaking bed. When I took a shower, the water would fill up on the bottom. It'd take forever to drain. Sometimes it wouldn't drain all the way, and I'd have to step in that filthy water, someone else's bath water, in order to take a shower. It was some pretty tough conditions, okay? And so, Latinos help me consistently, and I reject Matt Walsh's framing of illegals all being criminals and, you know, bad people and unworthy of human dignity and unworthy of help when they help me survive and when citizens, they look down on me. I think about my childhood and how many people are like, your mom's a stripper, she's a prostitute, your dad's this, your dad's that, you're white trash, you live with your grandparents. And I was a neglected child, so my grandma didn't care if I got to school safely or home safely. She didn't give a shit. Never made me breakfast. She rarely cooked. She didn't check to see if I brushed my teeth. She just was up all night, sleep all day, mentally deranged, deeply selfish, very cold, standoffish, not, you know, just not a good person overall. And then my step-grandpa was at work majority of the time. And he never talked to me about marriage, about how to find a husband, he taught me I had to have a job, right? Value of $1. Taught me yard work, shoveling snow, raking leaves, mowing the lawn, cleaning the gutters, using the weed whacker, staining fences, stuff like that. But that was pretty much it. And so I became more of a mature adult once I moved to California. And now there were some Mormons who helped my grandparents out when he wasn't able to get enough work to afford food. The Mormons gave boxes of food. When I lived with my mom in Philadelphia, there was the Puerto Ricans, and then there was blacks. You know, Philadelphia is different demographic. But for the majority of my life, Latinos, Mexicans in particular, have always been the group of people who have helped me survive more than white citizens. Okay? And so it's important to remind people that a green card is important. You want to do everything right, but we can have amnesty and mercy. If you recall, Tim Pool and others were saying Ronald Reagan caused all these problems. When Ronald Reagan gave amnesty to 9 million, I believe, around there, of the undocumented. And to me, if they're doing good and they qualify, have some mercy. I shared on my community tab as well the other day. ICE detained a woman who was still breastfeeding, and her husband is a veteran of the Marine Corps. Think about what Trump is doing, what MAGA is doing, okay? And there's so much nastiness in the Christian white nationalist movement of the MAGAtardians that I want to keep speaking up, because they are devoid of humanity, devoid of reality. They're quite demonic, and they don't actually read their Bibles. They don't have mercy. They think they're pacifists and hippy-dippy, washing feet, kissing your enemy's cheek. But no, they're not. And so this is why I wanted to make sure that I pointed out to you some other problems that can make New York City more livable if they were fixed. See, Matt Walsh was lazy and just like, illegals, illegals, illegals. Help people find a job, honest work, help them learn the language, okay? Offering services, guidance, counseling, provisions. These are good deeds. This requires effort and you to put your smugness down and your hypocrisy down. That can help people far better than stirring up the mob against non-whites and Muslims. Muslims are not a big problem in New York. But you can see how Matt is dancing between these different worlds. And I reject that. So fix the rat population, the subway crime, fix the prisons, let people work, help people get on the fast track to start earning a living, and teach the children in the schools about drugs, create labor camps so that inmates are forced to produce and be productive instead of sitting around using drugs and humping each other. There's a lot of other things that could be done. So Matt isn't really about solutions. He just wants to have someone to pour all his hatred on, and that's pretty much useless. Okay? Let me know what you think. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, join the blog. It's summertime, so there's kids outside, there's kids here, lots of noise. So I'm gonna go see no one's fighting over popsicles and sharing toys. So take care, and if you're also on summer break, hang in there, mamas. I prefer summer break though, because at least you get to be around your kids more, right? Take care.